Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be going over GME and AMC, and if we have time to, we'll go over the Grayscale Trust too, but I really want to focus today on GME, AMC, and RoaringKitty. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so we're going to start with the chart of GME. There's something I want to point out to you guys here that I noticed that's really quite peculiar. I'm not sure if anybody else that's even watching GME or AMC noticed this, but here's what I want to point out to you guys. This is Keith Gill's first video that he posted, or also known as RoaringKitty, on his YouTube channel back during 2020. This was in July 13th of 2020. Now, I want to point this out to y'all. Notice the year that this was posted, okay? This was in 2020. This was the same year that the previous, well, actually not the previous, but the Bitcoin halving happened during that year in 2020, that particular halving. This video was posted 2 months after the halving month for Bitcoin in 2020. Bitcoin's halving in 2020 was in May. This video was uploaded in July. Now, if you guys don't believe me, you can go back and look at it yourself. So RoaringKitty had a live stream today. You guys can also go look this up. As a matter of fact, I will actually, I'm going to go ahead and do it right now since we're already on here. Let's go over to RoaringKitty's page. If it wants to click, there we go. Okay, so maybe it's not going to show up under here. All right, so for live streams, you guys can see that he literally just had a post today for June 7th, 2022. Now, I want to point this out again, okay? So in 2020, his first video was in July 2020, 2 months after the Bitcoin halving. Today is June 7th, 2024, 2 months after the Bitcoin halving, okay? So there's some synchronicities going on here. In April of this year, we had the Bitcoin halving. Now, I'm going to go over to the charts. Actually, before I do, I want to go back to his previous video real quick. Okay, for whatever reason, this thing's taking eons. I don't know why. Okay, so I'm just going to have to give it a minute, guys. So go ahead and hit the pause button real quick. Okay, so again, July 13th, 2020. Okay, so we're going to go look at the charts now, and we're going to see what happened on July 13th of 2020. So here's that, basically right in here, right about here was the halving month, okay? So we have some kind of what looks like maybe a double bottom formation or something similar to that. But RoaringKitty posted his first video July 13th, 2020. The thing I want to point out here, you guys can see that this was actually a down week, okay? So during this week, when RoaringKitty posted, GME was actually down 14%. However, after that week, so again, that week would be today, as in the end of this week. After that week, it pretty much just shot straight up into the moon after that. Okay, this thing went from a ridiculous 93 cents per share. I don't think GameStop should have ever been valued at 93 cents per share. That's just my opinion. From 93 cents all the way up to $115. That is 115x after the initial dump. So once again, I want to point out the Bitcoin halving month was right around here. Okay, right at the bottom of this thing, we have kind of a similar formation here. If I go back in time, you guys can see we have a low, and then we have a slightly lower low, and then boom, this thing absolutely takes off. Okay, so we have the low, the slightly lower low, then we get the golden cross, and then bang, and then it breaks out of this trend line. And well, you get the golden cross first, and then the trend line breaks. So you have the low, lower low, the golden cross. Once the price gets above it, breaks the trend line, and then this thing just takes off like a rocket ship to the upside. So I want to point out the similarities here again. So if I actually scroll out here, you can see just how long this thing has been downtrending. Okay, very, very long time this time too. So it kind of tested this line for a long time, then had a massive sell-off and kind of almost a double bottom formation or a W pattern is another way to look at this. Either way, it's bullish. Tested the trend line for a long time. Big sell-off here, and then a low and a lower low. Also, you can see the W pattern here. And we also got a break of the trend line. Now we're getting the EMA. So the synchronicity is not exactly the same, but there's a very similar setup going on here. So the point I want to make is that during the week that RoaringKitty posted last time, there was actually a dump of the markets just like there was this time. Do I think it's going to keep going down? I mean, it's a possibility. GME is much more highly valued than it was back then, so anything's possible at this point. But as you guys can see, I mean, literally the week that he posted was pretty much the bottom at that point. I mean, there was like a little bit of time here where this thing went just a tad bit lower, kind of like a little fake out wick down here to 94 cents from 98 cents, and then just took off like a beast to the upside. If history is to repeat itself, I think something very similar is going to happen. Okay. That's just my opinion, but I do think something very similar is going to happen here. I mean, we're getting the golden cross. It's very normal for price action to skyrocket to the moon like this, take off from the EMAs. The EMAs to get a golden cross, and for the price to come retest the EMAs before ripping even higher to the moon. Okay. As you guys can see, we basically ripped right here, came back, tested the EMAs, right? Ripped again, tested, and then really took off again, and then came back, pulled back into the EMAs, and then tested and went up again. In terms of the golden cross, I mean, we got a massive rip above the golden cross here right about the time that it happened, but it also came back down almost immediately, which I guess you could say is kind of like the week we just had. And then it took off higher from there. This standard setup is actually what we look for swing trades. So when we swing trade a stock, usually we'll look for like some kind of break of the trend line and or bullish patterns. So we'll say, okay, this is a W pattern. So what we're looking for here is a golden cross. We want to get in, right? Ideally, the golden cross happens after the break of the trend line, but if it happens before, that's fine too. Kind of the main thesis here is that the golden cross is a starting point, so we would have swing traded this. And as you guys know, this trade, if we did take the swing trade from the signal from the golden cross, it would have been absolutely ridiculous. We would have made nearly 8,000% on the way up. Probably wouldn't have held that long if it was a swing trade, but you kind of see my point. So pretty much the swing trade strategy that we would use is get the golden cross, get a retest as close to the golden cross and the EMAs as possible, and then get in and let it ride up. But you can see a lot of similarities here. So it's possible we come back and retest. I mean, the EMAs have already moved up at this point, but it's kind of hard to say. Like, I think like the kind of the line in the sand here, if we're just talking about market structure here in terms of GME, I think this is a very important level right here. So kind of, it's not exactly perfect, but kind of somewhere in there is what we're looking for. So roughly about $24. A reason I say that is because this used to be resistance right here. You can see it was resistance for a long time before it eventually got pushed down. So theoretically, if we hold this $24 level, it should bounce. If it gets a close below that, obviously that would be concerning, but I don't see that as being likely at this point. There's just too much confluence between the previous cycle and this cycle. And like I said, we kind of got this breakout here and then retest. So pretty much if I was looking for a break of structure to the downside, and I'm not a bear, just so y'all know I'm very bullish, but I'd be looking for like a break of these highs or maybe like a break of these highs, like an area where a lot of price action is getting tested. You can see it was tested here, tested here, tested here, tested here, and then tested again here. It did actually come back down below right here, but it was a fake out, so that's always a good sign. Of course, I may not necessarily have drawn my trend line or my straight line in perfectly, but it doesn't really matter. So that's what's going on with GME. I am actually probably going to have to make a separate video for this, for the Grayscale Trust, but I just want to point that out to you guys. So one more time. So you guys can see very clearly what's going on here, okay? So kind of tested this trend line, sold off here, got a low, got a lower low, and then we eventually ended up getting this golden cross ripped. If I get rid of these here, actually, it'll be a lot easier to see. So we got the golden cross, we ripped, and then we eventually ended up getting a break of this trend line. Once we got a break of the trend line, I mean, from the trend line alone, this thing went up an absolute monstrous 4,700%. And granted, the Fed had rates at all-time lows and they were printing money and all that stuff, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the economy's in good enough shape right now to where, in my opinion, I think this thing could probably 10x in price. I'm not going to say that as a certainty, but you guys can see that it took literally from November 2021 to basically, I mean, what is that, like 2.5 years later for us to get to this breakout point? And back here, you can see November 2015 to September 2020. So this was even longer. This was actually like 5 years. So it's been long. It's been in the gutter for long enough, in my opinion. It would not shock me at this point if we did go to new all-time highs, because again, the bottom for this thing back here, before, I'm assuming there was some kind of maybe reverse stock split or something. I'm not sure what this is, but so the bottom back here was at 64 cents, whereas the bottom over here was at $10. So theoretically, if I were just to, let's say, measure from the trend line to the high, you guys can see it was an absolute ridiculous move. So 48% from the trend line to the high so far on the breakout. We've only gone as high as 220%. So from that perspective alone, it looks like this thing has barely moved at all. Barely. Like it's barely even doing anything. If this thing really, really rips up, like let's say 4,800%, like the previous cycle at the breakout of the trend line, I mean, you can see how ridiculous this gets. It gets up to $1,300 a share. I don't know that it goes that high, but I would be willing to bet. Of course, not financial advice, but I'd be willing to bet that this thing probably, if it looks anything like the previous cycle, probably $500 a share. Would not be out of the cards. I mean, that's roughly about a 5x the previous all-time highs. So AMC, this is a little bit of a different story. And yeah, I'm not really sure why I have these lines here. Let me get rid of these. I'm not sure why these are here. Sorry about that, y'all. So once again, I want to go back to RoaringKitty's posts and show you just how powerful this guy really is, and I can understand absolutely why the hedge funds and people on Wall Street would be terrified of him, because he supports the people. He doesn't support the institutions, or at least it appears to be that way, allegedly. So again, July 13th, 2020, this was the first post in the previous bull run. Okay, so if I go all the way back here, you guys can see that let's see, July 13th, right? So the week of July 13th that he actually came out and posted his first video about this, it actually dumped just like it did this week. And then it fell for another week, and then it took off like an absolute beast to the upside. It went from $28 to $38 or $40, whatever that is up there. So basically doubled in price. But from the time that he first posted about it until the time that it actually started ripping to the moon was roughly about 6 months on AMC. So it wasn't quite as fast. So it seems like it takes a little bit longer for AMC to play out. But this time could be different, okay? But the thing I want to point out here is some similarities. So you guys can see that pretty much we had kind of a double bottom here, but we also have a similar formation to GME. So we have a low and then a lower low here. We kind of had something similar here. So a low and then a lower low before rip. If I actually zoom in on this, you guys can see it a little bit more clearly. So a low and then a lower low over here. And then it's not exactly perfect, but we have a low, right? And then a retest and then a lower low here. And now it's just a matter of waiting to see this thing go higher. So this big, massive wick up here, like I've told you guys before, this huge wick, see this long thing right here? That to me indicates this thing is likely going to go higher, because you don't usually see a big wick like that unless you're at the top of a blow off top. and then the price doesn't go higher. If you get a wick like this at the top of a move, generally that's a different story, that's bearish. But when you get one at the bottom of the move, that indicates that there's serious potential and maybe even a likelihood that this thing probably will go higher. So like something like, I'll show you guys as an example here so you can really see it. So like, okay, so you have a wick here, right? This is the top of a move, massive sell-off. They have a wick here, but then it went higher, okay? And then you have a wick here, but then again, massive sell-off. Wick here, massive sell-off. There is a little bit of structure to keep this thing held down as of right now, but in my opinion, of course, we're in a falling broadening wedge. That's a bullish pattern. Target would be, again, roughly about, I'm not sure if I even measured this right, but I think if I'm not mistaken, I have to look this up again, but I believe that the target for the pattern is basically the top of the wedge, so it should be about $14. Again, there is a couple of gaps here that also need to be filled. That could be in the cards too. I mean, we could at the very least go up there and fill those gaps, because generally speaking, gaps love to get filled. But anyways, so we have the low and then the lower low and then the big move up. The thing I want to point out about this is when this did happen last time, and it only happened once, okay? It only happened once before the big bull run last time. And that was right before the bull run started. So the low, the lower low, and then took off like a rocket ship, and then pulled back, and then again took off like a rocket ship. You guys can kind of see like this trend line as well got broken, and then boom, absolutely ripped to the upside. So this is kind of the long-term downtrend that we're looking for to break here. It does line up with kind of this gap up here, but I don't think it's going to go up immediately. But if this thing does break above $24 over here, or $22, I should say, it's gonna fly. I can tell y'all right now, if it does not get suppressed at this level, which now the roaring kitty's back, I don't think it's going to. If we get a firm bullish breakout of this area, this thing is just going to rip. I don't know how high it's going to go. Anything's possible. So the thing I want to point out here is, so if I measure this from the golden cross to the all-time high, you can see it's 1100% move. And again, this was after kind of the double bottom here, or the lower lows. And I mean, it might be a little while before we get the golden cross, but let's just say that we're only measuring the yellow and the blue bands, and it gets a golden cross maybe somewhere up here at $6. And we go up 1100%. At the very least, this thing would go up to roughly around $76, which kind of almost lines up perfectly with these kind of tops here. So, but the major things that I'm looking out for on AMC specifically is a break of this broadening wedge. Okay, that's the first thing we want to see. Also want to see the structure level hold here. You can see I have this white line drawn across. So these candle tops here ideally would now be held as support. You can see that this candle right here did actually close right at that previous resistance. So ideally we get a bounce up. And then the other thing I also want to look out for is I want to make sure, or I want to be on the lookout for these gaps getting filled. So you can see there's clear gaps up here between 1650, 1950, and then 3650 and 43. By the time the price gets up to that first gap, it will still be below the trend line. But if we get above this big macro trend line, like the previous time, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee this gap's going to get filled, but the chances, the probability of it increasing is highly likely at that point. Notice that we do also have a golden cross on the daily time frame, so that's also very good. As you guys can see, it has been a long time since we've had a golden cross. We didn't have a golden cross since all the way back here at $41. So, and this thing is much lower price than it was at $41. So I would say the likelihood is much higher that this thing goes up instead of down. That's just my opinion, of course. So there's the gaps. And then the last thing I want to point out here before I go ahead and close out this video is the MACD. So you guys already know I'm going to point this out. So yeah, let me actually get rid of that. So MACD is having a golden cross currently. Again, this is on the monthly, so we're only at the start of June. We want to see a close with the MACD golden cross at the end of June. That's what we're looking for. So that's also in play currently. And also we still have this bullish divergence on the weekly. So the MACD is moving up, whereas the price is moving down. But now the price is actually moving up. And I would say that we're actually in a bull trend now, unless this gets what is the word, invalidated, and it gets back below this resistance, which I think is not likely at this point. Then we'll ideally move higher. Just so you guys know, I did load up on some more shares this morning. So actually now currently have, as you guys can see, almost 900 shares valued at about $6,000. I do believe in this movement. I am putting my money where my mouth is. And so, yeah, now it's just a matter of patience and persistence. I mean, this thing could go down, but again, the bottom was all the way down here at 236 before it started ripping. I mean, nothing ever goes down forever, and it never goes up forever. And this thing has been going down forever. So in my opinion, it's beyond overdue to go up. It really is. I mean, look at this. Went down for nearly, 3-4 years? Also went down for several years back here. Again, this is the year of the halving. We saw the bull run on AMC and GME. So check this out. AMC, the same month that Bitcoin was starting to rip to new all-time highs, AMC ripped to all-time highs. Imagine that. And very similar thing with GME. So not exactly perfect, but Bitcoin was kind of ripping to new all-time highs right in here as GME was going up. Coincidence? I don't know. You tell me. The last thing I want to point out here, and I did say before the last thing was the last thing, but there is one more thing. So GME earnings is coming up next week. Do keep a lookout for that. That is on... Oh, wait a minute. Oh, shoot, my bad. No, I was mistaken. So GME earnings was actually today, and it was not as great as everybody hoped. So yeah, that might maybe kind of explain the sell-off along with the jobs report. But whatever the case, I mean, this thing's been selling off for eons. I think it's an overreaction by the news, if you ask me, because again, GME just raised I don't know if they did another offering recently, but previously they raised they had like $2 billion in cash. So $2 billion in cash with innovation, in my opinion, could probably go a long ways. So anyways, this is GME and AMC. Hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all later. Peace.